Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. Today, we're excited to be joined by the founders of Modellus Novus, Jonathan Garnett, Preeti Sriratana, and Steven Harper. Together, they've created a unique architectural practice rooted in accessibility, innovation, and a deep commitment to equity. Jonathan leads the creative direction at Modellus Novus, shaping their design process with values he developed through years of hands-on work, including his experience with nonprofit projects in underrepresented communities. Preeti manages the firm's strategic growth and has an extensive background in education and nonprofit work. Steven brings operational excellence, ensuring the firm's projects are seamless for clients and efficiently executed. This conversation will dive into the founding story behind Modellus Novus, how their business model challenges the status quo by making great design accessible to all, and the strategies they've employed to foster a diverse and resilient studio. We'll also explore how their flexibility across market sectors has helped them grow while maintaining a focus on innovation and equity. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you here. It's been a long time in the making.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, so happy to be here.
So we usually do a little bit of an icebreaker just to warm things up a little bit. Is there anything that any of you, all three of you, are looking forward to either professionally or personally in the upcoming weeks?
Friday.
And we'll note that to listeners that this is recorded on a Monday. So Jonathan's already looking to Friday.
Yeah, right.
Good to know.
Yes, it's going to be my son's first birthday in a couple weeks. So I just became a dad last August. So looking forward to that.
That's a good start. Is there any themes for the party?
You know, we are trying to figure out what is the most low-key, laid-back event. So we haven't thought that far yet, but we do know we want to make it bird-themed because he loves birds. If you go outside and he hears a bird chirp or he sees a bird, like he will stop and point and laugh. And so we do know that much.
I know what costume I'm wearing now.
So we already know that Jonathan's showing up and it's going to be a costume affair too.
Right.
Word. I'll have to get a photographer now.
Steven, how about you?
Yeah, in a similar vein, easy question for me because I'll be having my second child in the next few weeks, hopefully, or that's what the doctors tell us.
Yes, soon.
So I almost want to jump into this episode a little bit in the middle with each of you being parents with younger children. Mm-hmm. So what did that conversation look like when you guys started thinking about paternity leave, especially for the founding partners?
Well, I mean, the funny thing is the three of us, we started thinking about our company 10 years ago, did not think about what it meant to take leave or for any of us to have kids because it was so far away. And then fast forward to now, just after lockdown, Steven was the first to welcome his daughter. Then a year-ish later, Jonathan welcomed his son. Then a year-ish later, I welcomed my son. And then in a few weeks, Steven welcomes his second one. And then a few months after that, our fourth partner, Anya, who's been with us since literally day one of the company and became partner almost 2 years ago now, is going to welcome her first one. So this all kind of happened quickly in the past few years.
We were working with a consultant and, covering a broad range of topics, but team benefits was one of them. And this was several years ago. And she mentioned, as your firm matures, so will the team, and more people getting married and more people having children. And you need to make sure, that everything is commensurate with that. And she was right. So it's exactly what's happening. Not just at the partner level. We have some team members becoming parents as well, have already and are about to, and all that kind of thing.
I think we have thought about it a lot, though, actually, in terms of how to make being a great parent possible in a field that's pretty demanding. And so kind of trying to figure out what it looks like, for us in some ways as the pilot program of that in our office is how is it sustainable for us, and even modeling that to our staff, in terms of being aware of our boundaries, having the kids come by the office, any number of things where it feels like that's, important to us. And if it's important to others in the office as well, how that can be something that we recognize, I think, at the leadership level. So I would say we've thought quite a bit actually about it.
I mean, I would share that in general in aspiring to create a firm that is going to support architects from as many backgrounds as possible to come in and be successful. Of course, when it came time to think of family leave, it was something that we discussed and explored ad nauseum. And so when we first rolled out a formal family leave plan, and we were always studying what other industries are doing, one of the things that we, this is sharing a bit behind the scenes and candidly, we were like, you know what? We should really do 5 months paid leave. Like that is what is really needed in order to support both the mom and the dad. And, let's understand, we won't truly understand if we're going to be able to do it successfully until we pilot it. And we have a big culture here of testing everything. And so we ran a test a couple of years ago where we did 5 months leave. We had 2 employees that had children then. And what we learned is that at the time we were 25 people. We learned that 5 months was a bit much for us. It was a bit difficult to sustain, but where we landed is we do offer 4 months paid leave. So that is our company standard regardless of seniority.
4 months is still unheard of, or relatively unheard of in the industry. I don't honestly know of any other firm doing that without some combination of short-term disability integrated into that.
Right. Which is a shame, in this country and in this industry. But I think that is sort of where things are right now.
Okay, so sorry to jump ahead of that conversation. I just felt that it flowed there.
Yeah, all good. And the thing is that a lot of, especially younger firms like ours, because we're only in year 10, we have a lot of young staff who haven't had families yet. So it is something that we're constantly trying to figure out how to refine further and see what are the different leave options. But as of right now, 4 months has been sustainable. And yeah, it is something that we want to be able to offer as broadly as possible.
Thank you for that. Are you willing to publish your policies or share them more broadly?
I don't know. Steven works a lot on it with our fourth partner, Anya. We haven't really talked about that.
Yeah, like the employee handbooks. There's 1 or 2 firms that publish their employee handbook, and I always point other firms to it when they're starting off or they're looking at revisiting their own policies.
Interesting. I can honestly say we've never really had that discussion, and I think it's certainly in the spirit of what we're trying to do, which is, at first care deeply, but then talk about what we can do to make the industry what we think it should be, and sort of share that, But on the flip side, a lot when we talk about our name, Modellus Novus, the new model, I think we talk about the aspiration and we're very proud of that, but then we are also very quick to say it doesn't mean we've arrived. It doesn't mean that's what we are. It means that's what the goal is. And so I think the flip side of publishing it is, to Preeti's point, if we published it when we said, we got to do 5 months and then just found that was like a little too much, I guess that's the flip side of publishing it.
Thank you. I didn't mean to turn this into a particular piece on the podcast. There's definitely those type of things that I would love to talk about in the future. And I think if you live into the spirit of your name, I think there's a way to do it in an honest way where you're able to share the changes over time as they evolve.
I mean, what we are doing is that in the coming months, we're going to start, our goal is per each department that the partners oversees. So 4 partners, Jonathan as creative director oversees all of our designers, Steven as operating director oversees both the operations of our firm, but also the mechanics of how our teams work on each of our architectural projects. Anya, our practice partners, working very closely across all teams and with people. And then myself as the managing partner, working with all of these departments, but also more on the client management, and then in tandem with partners, the vision of the company. We are aiming to roll out a series of medium pieces. We haven't done it yet, so don't hold this to us. Hopefully on a quarterly basis, at least, that's going to be sharing ongoing learnings of what we have seen work at our company so far. So we actually have those currently in drafts, and we're hoping to start rolling them out later this year, with the goal of everything we do, we want to open source it for other firms to also learn from and build off of, and then we can learn from them as well. So the handbook one, I think, is something we should definitely explore. We've never thought of it that way, but we did have a little over a summer ago, we were invited RFP to renovate the New York Times building. And in doing that RFP, because we disagreed with the way the RFP was being run, it was a more, let's just call it classic RFP process. They were asking for a lot of unbillable time. Let's just say that without getting into specifics. We did, in response to it, give them excerpts from our handbook of why we were not going to conform to some of those requests. Yeah. We wrote them a letter of what we stand for and why their requests actually hurt the industry, and excerpts from our handbook of why we won't conform to them. And lo and behold, we got chosen. But so yeah, we're open to sharing our handbook.
And that's amazing. Okay, so I feel like we have to officially back it up and go back 10 years ago and talk about the start of Modellus Novus. Who would like to kick us off?
I'll go ahead and kick off that story.
Okay, Jonathan's going to jump.
Yeah, 10 years ago feels like forever. I guess we're going on our 10th year now, but Steven and Preeti and I had known each other kind of from working together on a few projects here and there and just being in touch. And, we liked each other, but I would say, we didn't start out as friends. We were colleagues, and I have to say, just personally admired what each of these two did as individuals and how they approached their work. And, we decided to strike out on our own when some opportunities presented themselves, and, haven't really looked back. But like a lot of small firms, we didn't really know, I don't think, what we were doing, but we had 3 things that we said, kind of on day one. And this is like sitting on a couch in Steven's apartment in Harlem and talking about what something could become. And we said, first, actually, we wanted to make a real business. That's the way we talked about it back then. It's a real business. And for us, that meant actually providing stability in a business that, number one, I think was trustworthy and could be something that we could rely upon, the 3 of us, but, aspirationally, for anyone who would come to work for us, that would really feel like a place that was stable. We wanted, of course, to make brilliant, beautiful work, as all designers do. And we're invested in that from day one with whatever project we took on, even a trash room. That was one of our early projects that we had to design. How can we do this well? How can we do it wisely? And one of the other things that's been kind of a mantra is that we want to make projects for people, by people. And that's been our way of just saying that we wanted the focus of our work to be about bringing people together. And we've always said, what does that mean in the 21st century? That's been a big thing in our mind. We're all thinking about what the future can be. So that means really focusing, number one, on our team, on our consultants, and of course our clients. And then ultimately it's who's going to be inhabiting or using the space. And we really keep that at the forefront. But one of the things that it's done, I think it's really been incredible for us, just based on that kind of value and what we've learned and what we've seen happen, is that we have an incredible team with really low turnover for the industry, but they're not only incredible because they have all this talent and skill, but because they're great people, and they've been around long enough that we know them and we know each other in a way where I think that I've got a lot of pride in what that group of people that we have now is. But I think the other component of it that often gets overlooked, because I think, in the end, we're trying to build a business and do great work as well. Focusing on people has actually been a way for us to achieve pretty, I think, incredible design results for the projects that we're working on. It's been great for business, in terms of having a stable team with a long tenure, people who know our processes. So there's so many things that go kind of out of that basic idea of focusing on people. And it's really been the balance of focusing on people and executing work and meeting demands that I think is the experiment of our business that we have. We don't necessarily know all the outcomes, because at least from what we're trying to do, we haven't seen it before in the way that we want to do it. So that's a little bit about kind of where we started, and that was the ambition. And over the years, I think we've gotten better and better about understanding what that means in more specific terms as you learn the nuts and bolts. We've really had to build this brick by brick, because it was new for all of us, though we believed in each other.
I think there's so much to unpack there, right? I think it's kind of nice knowing that you guys, or even that you guys had to do a trash room, right? You said in the beginning, like, everyone has to start somewhere. I kind of want to pull on this notion that you wanted to make this quote unquote a real business. And in your head, then, to me, what does that make the standard architecture firm if not a real business? I also want to understand, what experiences did each of you have? So your response was, we want to end up somewhere different than where we were.
Yeah, I think a part of the founding story definitely was experientially and observationally the jobs we'd had, the jobs our friends had, and did come from, I think, a place of critique about the industry and that emphasis on business. I remember, I think we said, like, we want someone who's in a completely unrelated field. We would want to, like, open our books to them and them to look and say, that's healthy. And I'm referring specifically to finances, because that's easy to, like, measure. It's objective, but often it's other things have to be healthy for that to be healthy, often, not always. And so I think it did come from a place of seeing from our own experiences and those of our colleagues that wasn't always the case in our industry. But then what it really meant, and I think Jonathan was starting to touch on this, is the realization that as an architecture firm, we are a service industry. And as a service industry, what you are as a business is the people that are in the business. I mean, from a balance sheet perspective, like, there's we rent our office, we own some computer equipment, but what are we really? We're just the people that we've pulled together in the room to make the team. And so I feel like that, I mean, I don't want to, it's not innovative, it's not groundbreaking, but that's where we've focused and where we've tried to differentiate a little bit, is making sure we're investing in that and realizing that sometimes, that retention is more valuable than, like, short-term profits for Q1 of a given year or whatever. And so everything that we've done has been sort of built around that. And Jonathan, from the creative director seat, always said, like, I want to have long-standing relationships to rely on when I'm, sort of in the trenches on a project, and have built rapport with the team and know who I'm working with, and not have this, like, hired gun feeling where it's just, we landed a project, let's hire 3 people, the project's over, let's fire 3 people, that it just is short-sighted in our view. And so whether it's, developing a ways of working manual, which Anya spearheaded, so that new hires feel like they can understand how we do things as soon as possible and feel like new team members as soon as possible. We do training constantly. how do you get people to stay long-term in an industry where Preeti likes to say, you look at an architect's LinkedIn, you tend to see, every 18 to 24 months, you tend to see a new thing, and we understand why. But aside from compensation, which of course is a huge piece, what are people looking for? They want to advance their own ability to succeed in the field as architects, as designers, as professionals, project managers, whatever it is. And so trying to speak to that and investing a lot of time and energy and financial investment as well in building those tools so that the team has that to rely on, that's an incredibly important component. And what we over 8 or 9 years started to mean when we said we want a real business.
Yeah. Preeti, anything to add?
The only thing I was going to say is that from the very beginning, we come from I'll speak for Jonathan and myself because we're closer in age. Steven's a few years younger than us, but I think we come from the generation when during our time in schools when the term starchitect was coined, if I'm not mistaken. It's somewhere in our more professional adult career. And so, we found that culture in our industry, it is actually what damages the industry and hinders, I think, the ability for us to make progress in terms of creating access for others and also in how spaces are created. And so for us from the beginning, going back to when we sat down on Steven's couch to come up with a business model, one of the first things that we acknowledged was that architecture is a collective progress, that there's not any one person that creates architecture, and that the business that we would build is going to be based off of the ethos that we're going to create a platform that supports architects. And so I don't know if you want to call that innovative, but I think what's a bit unique from it is that a lot of, you'll especially tend to see this with recent graduates, come out of school with the belief that, great design will solve all problems, right? You make whatever sacrifice to do a great design. That design is going to get you the press and notoriety to get you more clients. And that's going to give you the deal flow and revenue that's going to eventually allow you to figure out how to create a real architecture firm. And that's just not true. I think that's one of the misconceptions that's holding the industry back. And we want to do it differently. We're like, that's not what it's about. It's not about any one thing. It's actually about the team of people that it takes to do architecture. And so that has always been our approach from day one. That's why we always knew from the beginning, even when we mapped out the entire business plan over the course of 9 months, this is like every single aspect of what it's going to take to start this firm, down to, I think, was it Steven that had a spreadsheet that had the cost of like a dustpan down to the cent? Because he's like,
no, that was me. That was me, and that was
you.
That was the last spreadsheet I made. But yeah,
yeah. So it was like, this has to be financially viable. And one of the last pieces of the puzzle was, what are we going to call ourselves? And without hesitation, none of us wanted to put our name on it, because it's not about any one of us. It's about the platform that we are creating. So I don't know if you want to call it innovative, but it is definitely different, I think, from a lot of other architects.
So how did you guys end up partnering up? Obviously, it's interesting to me. Jonathan said you were acquaintances to begin with, and through this process, you've obviously have become great friends. But how did you all know when you would have good chemistry with one another? And then how did you all eventually find your ways into each of your roles? Jonathan, how did you go from creating that spreadsheet over onto the design side of things? And then how did Steve end up in operations? And how did that all play out?
He's better at spreadsheets and I'm terrible at spreadsheets. And I just had a different opinion of myself, I think, 10 years ago. But I think that, one of the interesting things I would say, I think it's a really interesting question, because partnerships are tricky things from not only what I've seen, but what I've experienced, because you're really committing yourself legally, but also in a way emotionally to one another. And the same way we approach our projects, which we say like our project is the hero more than our ideas or something else. The project should be leading us. I think we've always let our business lead us as well. in such a way where we're making decisions as best we can for the best of our company, because we know of all the aspirations that we have for what it does for all of us who are participating in it. And so I think chemistry is always natural. Certainly, that's just human, but it's also built through adversity, but also a kind of outlook that allows you to kind of like keep your ego secondary because there are much bigger goals. And I think that's just a basic team kind of approach that I don't think is necessarily prevalent. And I don't mean only in our industry, but just across the board. It's something that one has to actively think about and work on. And somehow that really keeps a really amazing balance between the three of us and our fourth partner, Anya, but also our team, which has gotten better and better at checking us, and kind of telling us when we're messing up, which is something that I think actually builds a much more robust kind of group of people working on stuff with a lot more elasticity. So it's just been at the forefront of what we're doing from day one, in a way by chance, but also now very much by design and intention.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about how you've built your practice. You mentioned that your team also checks you. So how do you cultivate a culture that allows for that feedback to happen at the ground level up to you as partners? I think back to the day as a new graduate, and you get both ends of the spectrum, right? You get designer types that believe they're going to go into their firm and be everything in that firm. And then you get people like me, who's very much the rule follower, who stays in my lane. And there's a little bit, I'm not going to speak up because they made it really clear that I need to stay in my place until I've been given permission to. So how do you foster a different type of culture than what's usually seen in firms?
So far, every team member that comes to MN on their first day, they have what we call a first day essay meeting. This is sharing some under the hood stuff with you. I think this is the best way to answer your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So every new team member has a first day essay meeting. It's a 30-ish minute meeting that takes place the first half of their day usually. It is a meeting that I've used as an opportunity to sit down with that new employee, often in person. And what we do in that meeting is a few things. It's an opportunity for myself as one of the founders to share some background on the company and why we founded the company. A lot of this has been shared throughout their interview process, but we feel it's important to restate it on their first day so they understand the type of firm that we are building. In that meeting, we also share about how, as a mindset, we really think of MN as a startup. And so with the startup culture, we always share to them that we purposely, in figuring out the MN model, that we're looking to other industries outside of architecture, whether it's finance or consulting or fashion or entertainment, and wanting to pull the best practices from those industries. And this, and then we really foster a culture of testing, which I think I mentioned earlier. And the idea is that regardless of your level of seniority here, if you come across anything that you're reading about that other companies do, or your friends are talking about something and you think it could be valuable at MN, then to bring it to a manager or partner here and let's test it out. Let's spend a quarter, see if it is something that's going to help us. If it does, it'll become a new part of our model. And if it doesn't, it's a test, whatever. And as a part of that is also, I think you hear it a lot in tech, especially, that we really want to foster a culture of, people not being afraid to fail, because we're all trying to figure out how to do this. Like, this is a work in progress and trying to figure out the new model. Like, we remind people, if somebody has figured out a better way to create a sustainably financial business model in architecture, then, somebody would have solved the problem for us, but nobody has yet. So everything that we've developed to date is what has been working so far, but it really is a team effort and we want everybody to help us figure it out. And the only rule is that there's no rules here. If there's a better way to do it, we'll try it. And so we really encourage everyone's input and have really fostered that culture here. And by the way, the first day essay ends with an essay assignment where we ask every team member. I was like, since I gave the title of that meeting, I should finish that anecdote. The essay is that we asked the team members to spend no more than 30 minutes to write whatever they want. Ideally, it's at least half a page, but it could be any length. It could be any topic. It's about anything that you want. Don't worry about grammar or spelling or anything. The idea is that they will submit that essay to myself by the end of the day. And that next morning, that essay will be shared team-wide for everyone to read. And the idea is that it gives people insight into who they are and allows that person to just, open up and share more about themselves. It's a way to jumpstart the camaraderie. That essay is then shared in a first day essay folder that we have here. Every team member's done it, even the founding partners. And that first day essay folder is accessible to anyone that works here. So you get to see what other people wrote. So we've gotten everything from poems to we had an elaborate 3-page business plan of somebody else's like career aspirations and what their firm is going to be. And that was from an intern. So we get everything, but it's just like a fun exercise. And we ask everyone to do it on their first day.
Where do you draw information from, and how do the three of you get inspiration from outside of practice? I ask this because I feel like so often partners in firms, especially your size, are so heads down, right? They're worried about the next project. They want to know that, they are worried about making payroll every single time. And in general, in the industry, there's not enough room to create the headspace to even see what's outlying out there. So how do you all make room for it?
Well, I was going to say, I'm not sure there's one source, but I was going to answer what you asked at the very end there, which is one thing we do that maybe others do. And I will say, I don't like to give him credit, but it was Preeti's idea and it was a good idea. But we do an annual partner retreat specifically because it's so hard. We have some meetings, some recurring meetings on the calendar, but they do tend to be what's today, what's the project that needs our attention, what's the marketing or financial matter that needs our attention or whatever. And that's life. And you could easily just get into that and live there and be there indefinitely. But we step out of that purposely for a 4-day weekend. And we have some other things throughout the year that sort of build up to that and then do some follow up after that. So it's not sort of singular, but that is the moment where we remove ourselves the most to really create the room to think about what are we doing and why are we doing it and how are we doing it. And, in terms of sources that we pull from, we're very fortunate to have Preeti. He's aside from his training in architecture and professional career in architecture, he's had a lot of experience in the nonprofit world, and he's dabbled in tech. He can share more about it if he cares to. And then, we all have colleagues that work in other industries, and we go to dinner and we talk about what we're doing, and they say something they do from their industry, and it, sounds intriguing. And we think about what can we test or pilot based on that.
I also think part of being a partner that I'm learning about is that you have to be heads down, but also you have to have your antenna up all the time. And so I would say I'm always trying to not only read things that interest me. Maybe it's just a catchy title or a cool picture. I don't know. But, it's also a matter of, you do overhear enough stuff in the world if you're in the world. And I think that's part of what we've even told our employees is part of what you bring back is by living, and being out there. If you're always in our studio, we're not going to get that kind of diverse information, which allows us to kind of synthesize something new, whether it's creative or whether it's about our business. And it's amazing when you just give yourself and the people you work with the kind of room to find, explore who they are and their interests, what comes back organically. I think maybe it's because I'm not really a traditional business person. I don't really have rules for how we find information. It's more about what you do with what you hear. And all of a sudden it actually my one simple thing I heard ignites a whole kind of way of thinking for Steven, Preeti, Anya, or one of our team members because of the information that they have.
And I would just say one more thing is, from the beginning, we always came into this as founders with a mindset that as the company leadership, our employees do not work for us. We work for our employees. And so it makes you constantly think about ways to make them more successful. And so, by nature, like Jonathan said, your antenna's always up. You're always trying to figure out, like, how are other companies making their employees successful? So, and the culture of testing makes it fun too, right? Because it's like, all the time we talk with our management team, like, what tests are we running next quarter? And then we tell the team, we're going to try this out. And FYI, this might totally fail. This might suck. And then after we run it, some tests run for a quarter, some of them only run for a month. And then it's like, let's do a postmortem. What aspects you want to keep? You want to keep none of it? All right, all in agreement. That was terrible, and keep moving. And that way it also keeps things dynamic here at the firm.
I think, Preeti, some of your tech lingo is sneaking in there because you don't hear other architects talk about postmortems as much as design engineering teams. I'm interested because was founded at a unique time and was still relatively new before the pandemic hit. So what lessons did you learn and changes did you make throughout the pandemic? Or how did your firm merge out of the pandemic? To the way you work together, or, is there anything you like to highlight?
I can start with a few things that come to mind, but I would say that the summer of 2020 was absolutely pivotal for us on multiple levels, right? Because we had all been quarantined for several months. And I think we said one thing, partners said to each other, no matter what, there's going to be a company that comes out of this. But we actually went into the pandemic with the mindset that this is actually a time to consider how to grow. Prior to that, I think we hadn't honestly had some of the time to analyze what we were doing well and what we weren't. And we said, well, let's try to take advantage after being healthy and being safe and making sure our families were okay. What could we do to actually make our firm better? So I think that's just sort of like maybe in our DNA to figure out not just how to survive, but to thrive, right? It's not just about maintaining a position. But, we were also emotionally moved across the board in our office. At the time, the staff was 11 by a lot of the social unrest going on for personal reasons. It hit close to home, and it became very meaningful for us to figure out as a company how to speak out. And I would say that this company, at least for a person like myself who's uncomfortable speaking out in some ways, the company was an amazing platform for us to come together and then to coalesce around a message and then to enact it in some way. And the way we did it was with ourselves first. We had strong words and feelings, but a lot of it was, how do you model it at home first? Because I don't think we would criticize things around us if we didn't think that we weren't already able to do it better somehow or weren't putting it in practice. So that meant a lot of things from a business standpoint. I think one of them was, first and foremost, the most meaningful thing to me was we started to have, every day we did a kickoff and we made sure everybody's health, how was your health, whether it was emotional or physical, how you're doing. We shared like a little facts, and every day was a way to check in because none of us were together. And that was actually the building of a kind of, not only like a natural camaraderie, but a way that people began, I think, to rely on one another, and the company began to see itself as a group of people working together, and that checking in became really critical. And, another component was like, how do we grow this thing? How do we stay in touch with the people who had made us successful to date? And many of our hospitality clients who were struggling the most were also the ones hatching the plans for what is the next thing that they're going to do, because they couldn't have their world collapse. And I would say we were lucky enough to be brought along with some of those people who were thinking ahead, taking risks, financial, health risks, to like figure out how to keep their businesses going and what role could we play. And I think there was a lot of amazing energy that was unorthodox at that moment that seemed very rational at the same time, because it was like, this is the only kinds of answers we can give in this moment in time. And from there, how do we really unfold it? And one of my favorite statistics about our company is that over the course of the pandemic and quarantine, we actually went from 11 to 19 people we grew, which in hindsight is surprising, or maybe, well, not surprising, but exciting. But with some bias now, I think a lot of what we were doing was making it natural for that growth to happen. And we did a lot of other thinking too. We really began to actually structure the company in a way and see the pieces that we needed to manipulate, which Steven and Preeti can kind of add more on to what that meant. But it was a deliberate kind of like, okay, let's get this thing structured in front of us so that we can really go.
Anyone else want to share more?
I want to say it wasn't only surprising in hindsight. I think it was surprising while it was happening. But.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think because by then our company was 5 years old, and we have one of our company values is the team. That's when we have 7 internal values that people are hired by, managed by, and if we have to, are let go because we couldn't. They failed to meet the 7, and one of them is the team. And so, because our team knows that we are constantly looking for the best ways to support them, when lockdown hit, it was incredible to see the 11 people pulled together. Like we didn't. One of the things that was not easy for us to do, and it was actually quite scary many, many times, is that ultimately we never had to let anyone go during the pandemic. We all pulled together. We all took steep salary cuts. Everybody understood that this is what it was needed to keep the team intact. But also just showing like this team's fighting spirit. We also use it as an opportunity, as Jonathan said, to start building out the company, like internally. Like one of the lines that we were saying, I'm not a big sports person. I actually don't follow any sports, is champions are made in the off season. And so that was something that we were saying to ourselves, like, all right, this is a time to build the company. And the other one that we shared a lot, a quote this team hears us say, is from another sports quote, but it's from this football, the winningest college football coach, Paul Bryant, from, I think he's like from the 50s or 60s or something like that. Again, I'm not a sports person, but his quote is,
I'm not either. It's okay.
The quote is, it's not the will to win that matters. Everyone has that. It's the will to prepare to win that matters. And so basically throughout lockdown and coming out of it, preparing to win is a line that this team said like over and over again. So it was like building out all the different aspects of our business, so that, just to share here, one of the big RFPs that we got invited to was to do hospitality at the Lincoln Center. And because we were the underdog invited to it, there was already like 5 or 6 very established firms, or in terms of the person who invited us, to quote, you're going to go up against some juggernauts, and you're not going to win, but I thought you should be given an opportunity to be considered. And so for us, we were already excited to be on their radar, pursued this thing, not thinking that we would have a shot, but it was just, to be in the same era as Lincoln Center was like exciting in itself. But everything that went to that RFP were things that we built out during lockdown. So we were like ready to go, and very fortunately ended up winning that project. And it was a big stepping stone for us. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it would have happened if our teams didn't pull together the way they did. It was actually pretty magical to see. Everyone really stuck together.
You and I talked about this, and I think, I would love to follow up with you all with another episode to talk about all these little stories that you guys, that really makes up who MN is, but you're like, that's not innovation. But I think in the scheme of things and in the scheme of the industry overall, that I would actually argue that your approach is quite unique. And if you don't want to use the word innovation, let's at least acknowledge that it's quite a different approach than most firms would otherwise take. I want to talk a little bit about your project mix, because a lot of firms, especially younger firms, think they go out saying we really need to specialize. It's easier to get work that way. And there's a lot of conversation in general around specialization in architecture, especially given the size of the firm, though you've done a lot of projects across multiple sectors. And I think you're not necessarily anti-specialization, but you've seeked out multiple project types. Can you talk a little bit about that approach?
Sure. So our work, while we are, I think, most notorious for our hospitality work, let's say, it's only because that's the work that gets the most publicity and also has the most public access, but it only represents about a fifth of our built portfolio. So our other work is in commercial, retail, mixed use, light industrial, and some residential. And I would say the common denominator among all these projects is that each one, two things. First of all, we only work with, this is something that the team and our clients here say a lot. In being a very values-driven company, a rule that we've made for ourselves from day one is that we're only going to work with those who are aligned with our values. And so that is everything from our employees to consultants to general contractors, but especially our clients. And so one of the things that we have made as the mission of our company, it's not something that we say openly, but our company mission is to design spaces for the many. We have always founded MM with the idea that we want to create spaces that were welcoming and that Jonathan says it best. He's like, just tell people that we're futurists. We're designing for what the future is going to look like. And so for us, especially being in New York City, we just want to create spaces and thus a firm that's designed them representative of the city that we're in. And so for each of the projects that we've taken on, the common denominator is that the clients believe in creating welcoming spaces, even in our light industrial projects. So the first one that we did was for a company that works closely with the U.S. military. And so it's like 100,000 square feet at the Brooklyn Navy Yards. It is a highly secure facility. And as part of it, at their main entry, we incorporated a public park where we pulled in the perimeter of the park. The outside secure perimeter of the facility in order to create an indoor accessible park to the public. And so what I'm starting to realize is that might be completely confusing how I explained all of that. I don't know if I should try to explain it again. But yes, in gist, that is how we've chosen the projects that we take on. It is important for us to be able to, the through line of creating welcoming spaces, which we believe is a civic function, is something that it exists in all of our work.
I think it also, and you sort of recognize this in the question, there are challenges to that approach, not specializing, because I think especially from a marketing standpoint, it may be like more convenient or easy to just set up shop in one area and make yourself the sort of the expert, so to speak. But yeah, to Preeti's point, we found our through line in the work, and it wasn't about typology. It was about what the space could accomplish and the value alignment with the clients. But I think another benefit, and it goes back to that core belief in us building our team, it's also for us. We find it more exciting to have different challenges. You wake up every day and you come in and design is design and architecture is architecture, but having really sort of very different clients and projects that have different challenges to solve is great. It keeps us sane, I think. And I think our team appreciates it. And it's a whole conversation that wouldn't exist if we didn't have that diversity of typology, is, sitting down with a team member and them saying, what I'd really like to work on is this. I've done some of these, but I see other people around me doing this, and I'd like a shot at that. And it just keeps things, fresh and challenging. But we also think it informs the work. Someone that's done, I don't know, highly intricate custom millwork for a high-end private residential space is bringing something to their commercial project or hospitality project or even light industrial project, just that someone who's just sitting there and doing the one thing all day, every day, maybe doesn't have.
I think there's a lot of people, especially as you look at Gen Z and what they want to get out of an employer and the impact that they want to make on the planet or on the world and within their communities. And I know there's a lot of individuals that would say, that when they graduate out of school want to be able to work at MN. So what does growth look like for the future of MN? And have you ever considered opening up your doors a little further geographically when it comes to hiring or even building, I don't know, a remote studio?
Yeah, that's really actually been very top of mind for us recently. And I think all three of us, by virtue of the different hats we wear, would answer the question really differently. So maybe we each speak to it for a second. But I think we do envision additional scale for the firm. I think that to do the kind of work we want to do and to have the kind of impact we want to have, to create value for ourselves and for our clients and for our consultants that we collaborate with, it does imply sort of growing the company. In terms of our team, we actually have a very international team. I think we've actually cast a very wide net. I don't have the the country list in front of me, but it is they sort of come from all over. And I think we want our work to be also very geographically diverse. And we are starting to have more and more projects outside of our sort of immediate footprint here, being based in New York. And whether that means eventually opening satellite offices, I think that's something that we're probably open to. But I think there's also an interest in centralizing the team and keeping everyone together to a large degree. And so while the work can be geographically diverse and the team can hail from every corner of the planet, hopefully, eventually, I think we have, most of the continents, obviously not Antarctica, and I think not Australia, but I think we've got the other, whatever that is, 5 covered. I think that is a goal of ours, for sure.
Anyone want to weigh in with an additional viewpoint, just because Steven led with the fact that each of you would probably answer that differently?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I mean, we've talked about it a lot. So you covered, I think, a lot of the discussions that we've had to date, both formal and informal, about how to grow and what we want growth to mean. We want to grow, but it's not for the sake of growth. It's for the sake actually of really, I think, for me, honestly, seeing how far our mission can take us. I think that's the exciting part about being somebody who had the opportunity to found a company, is to really let it be like a child and see how far they can grow. It's up to us, but it's also up to the group that we're building and the next generation. We've already talked about what a succession plan may mean for us, at this point, and how to plan for it. Because I think we see ourselves as hopefully beginning something that's meaningful to people over time, not just the 3 of us who started the company. And that's something to kind of keep top of mind for us. The other piece of our company that is just personally really important is designing for me very early on. I'm half Black and half Japanese, and this designing was a very awesome tool for actually just getting to sort of express or show what I was. And I always think there's probably other people out there who feel that same optimism about being able to simply do this thing as best they can as a way of opening up this mission and kind of leading. So for me, growing the company has so much to do with that. The diversity of people we can bring in and giving them a chance to stay, in the field is, for me, really kind of rooted in that optimism and what we can do down the road.
Yeah, I was going to say we definitely want to grow as long as we'll be able to. The biggest thing is maintain quality and culture and continue to have impact on the industry, because that has always been the first priority for us. I also, this is just speaking for myself and not necessarily for my partners, but I know it's something that we all prioritize, is that we also don't, I think a lot of firms often want to grow for the sake of growth, and that the KPI they use to measure it is headcount. And headcount's not enough, because it's easy to pay everyone poorly and have a lot of people work for you. For us, we want to be able to, if we're able to continue to maintain impact and the quality of our work, then we want to be able to, we are forecasting, without saying too much, a company larger than 100, that is for sure. We're already in talks to gain the adjacent space next to our current office, which would double our footprint. Our office is already almost maxed out at 35 people. So that gives you a sense of how much we're immediately looking to grow. But also the other KPI is revenue. And revenue should not be a bad word in our industry, because in creating a place that's going to give access to more people from different backgrounds, we want people to think about architecture as a place where they can make a living and be able to buy their own home, be able to raise a family, be able to take family vacations, right? Be able to pay off all their loans in a timely fashion, be able to think about retirement. So for us, the KPIs are both headcount, or first impact, headcount, and revenue. And so that's something we are trying to figure out, and it'll be organic for us. We've actually, in not wanting to hire and fire and treat our employees like commodities, because everybody we bring on board, we let them know we're hiring you for the long term. We've actually, in trying to manage our cash flows, have actually declined large opportunities because we didn't understand how we can make the cash flow for it work. So we'd rather have steady growth. And that's something, again, continuing to figure out how to do better. But it is a long way to say, yes, we want to grow larger as long as we can have a lot of impact and help the people that are working with us.
That's amazing. I want to end with kind of a round robin of advice that you would give to young architects that are looking at starting their own practice or are wanting to build something different in the field, short of sharing Jonathan's spreadsheet and your intern's business plan with everyone. Who would like to kick us off? Steven, do you want to chime in and we'll finish it with Preeti?
I'll start because I probably haven't don't ever know what advice to give. That's kind of my personality, in a way. But I would say also that's maybe a good reason to share some things. I think you don't ever really know what you can accomplish. You just have to kind of start. And we constantly are sometimes being our own enemy, trying to be too perfect or trying to solve the world at once. And I think I've learned you sometimes just need to start with the simplest things, like how much does it cost to open an office? The spreadsheet was actually necessary for me to take a leap of faith because of wanting to make sure I wasn't going to starve, right? So you have to kind of just start and believe in that. And I think another huge thing that I've learned to believe in is trusting other people, depending on how you want to grow. But even if it was just the three of us, it's fully leaning into trust for other people. And that doesn't always mean the outcome is how you want, but it's the basis of real growth.
Steven, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I would caveat that this is retrospectively or whatever, retroactively, maybe the advice I would give myself, but it doesn't mean that it's good for other folks. To be building things for how you want it eventually and not just how it needs to be in the moment. And there's no perfect version. I think Jonathan is also right. You can't, just sometimes you just do something and do it and move on. But trying to eliminate how often you have to redo something by thinking about, will this stand up over the course of a year or 3 years or 5 years based on what I'm trying to accomplish with my firm is, whatever the thing is. We instituted some things that I think felt really silly when it was just 5 or 6 of us in a room, but that we hoped would be meaningful when the team got a little bigger and, you start needing to manage how things get communicated more or whatever, just as one example. But I do think that, dreaming big, but then also building things for how you want it to be versus just how it is in the moment is critical.
Great. Preeti, do you want to have the final say?
Sure. Come up with a crazy Latin-based name that confuses everyone. I kid. I would say two things. I don't think this necessarily applies to architecture, but I will emphasize it for our fellow architect peers. First thing I would emphasize is to set your company values so it's very clear what matters to you and your founders and the team. Super important. And then from there, seek value alignment. So use those values to determine who you're going to hire, who you're going to work with. That is key. And then the second one is I'll share one of our MN values, which is, again, the team. Put your people first. They're the ones who are actually going to design, build the architecture, support them, and they'll deliver something incredible. And in turn, you will find clients that value that. And it's a snowball effect. Like in the beginning, you might be like, oh, and we actually dealt with this. We would go out and we would talk about our company's mission to design spaces for the many, and that we're value driven, and that here's some of the things that we care about. And, when you're like 3 founders, 2015, you get an Asian, a Black, and a white kid going out pitching this, and people are like, you guys are corny. It's like, well, you know what? We're not aligned, so we're not going to work with you anyways. But then you get the handful that are like, okay, I get this. I'll give you guys a shot. And what you realize is that, of course, you have to deliver great work at the end of the day. You can't just talk this stuff and deliver a shitty product. When you deliver great work, you start to attract a lot of like-minded people because you'll start to get referred to them. It's just like that snowball effect has allowed us, I think I might have mentioned this to you before, Evelyn, but the first 8 years of our practice, we didn't have a website online. Oh, websites are online. We didn't have a website with our work formally online, nor marketing or PR. And so by the time we launched our website, that's up now, March of 23, we were already at 25 employees, 60 commissions, a bunch of accolades for our clients, literally all word of mouth, repeat clients, and referrals built off of seeking those who have value alignment with us. It's easier said than done, granted. And there was like, the day-to-day was actually, there was a lot of challenges to get to this point, but at our core, that was the basis of how we built our company.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.